The taxi driver warned me not to stay after sunset, but by the time I realized why, the forest had already closed in. By the time Ethan stepped out of the taxi and onto the gravel road leading toward Aokigahara, the light was already fading behind the clouds. He had traveled halfway across the world to capture footage for his channel. Real haunted places, real tragedies, real history. But the moment he looked into the dense curtain of trees ahead, he felt something shift inside his chest, a small tightness that made him swallow hard. He wasn't the type to scare easily. He'd filmed in abandoned hospitals, storm drains, forgotten prisons. But Aokigahara had a reputation that sat heavier than any of those. Even standing at the entrance, Ethan felt like the forest was already watching him, quietly evaluating whether he belonged there. A sign stood near the path, urging visitors to think of their families, reminding them their lives mattered. Ethan paused, reading every word, even though he had seen pictures of this sign countless times online. It felt different in person, more desperate, more real. He lifted his camera, recorded a slow pan, and whispered a few notes for later editing. When he stepped into the forest, the temperature dropped so abruptly that he shivered. The trees grew unnaturally close together, twisting upward like they were trying to hide the sky. The wind barely made it through the thick branches, so the forest stayed eerily still. Even the birds seemed to avoid it. Ethan walked deeper, following the official trail. His footsteps sounded too soft, almost like the ground was swallowing the noise. He stopped to adjust his camera, had noticed the strange texture of the soil. Volcanic rock, uneven and porous. Old stories said compasses malfunctioned here. He had brushed that off as superstition, but when he pulled out his digital compass, the needle flickered like it was nervous. "Okay," he muttered, exhaling lightly. "That's weird." He pushed forward. The deeper he went, the more the silence pressed against his ears. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was the kind that felt intentional, heavy, watching, listening. Sometimes Ethan thought he heard something behind him, a faint crunch of leaves or a soft shift of weight. But every time he turned around, nothing moved. Just rows and rows of trees staring back at him. He saw the first marker about 20 minutes in, a strip of blue ribbon tied to a branch. He recognized what it meant. People who walked into the forest tied ribbons, yarn, anything to help them find their way back in case they changed their minds. Some returned, some didn't. Ethan lifted it gently, the faded fabric cool between his fingers. It fluttered a little, even though no wind moved. He walked another 5 minutes and found more ribbons, yellow, white, red, each stretched deeper into the forest. He didn't plan on leaving the path, but a curiosity crept over him. His viewers always wanted authenticity, something raw, something real. If he stayed only on the clean tourist trail, the story would feel shallow. So he followed the red ribbon. It led between thick trees and into deeper, darker sections of Aokigahara. The light thinned, turning dim and cold. Even though sunset was still hours away, Ethan's breaths grew louder. His footsteps felt too alone. He kept filming. Every few seconds he heard something. Tiny snaps, faint rustling, like someone walking just behind him, but stopping whenever he stopped. He turned around 3 times, scanning the dark trunks, waiting for something to shift. Nothing. But the feeling didn't leave. The sensation of presence clung to him like humidity. Then he saw it. A tent. A single, faded yellow tent, resting between the roots of 2 massive trees. The zipper hung open slightly. No movement inside. No sound. Ethan approached slowly, lowering the camera for a moment. His throat tightened. He had seen abandoned tents in videos before, but none of those belonged to him. None of them were right in front of him. None of them breathed cold tension directly into his spine. "Hello?" he called out softly, more out of respect than expectation. No answer. He tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. He stepped closer, the moss muffling his steps. Just as he reached out to lift the flap, something cracked in the forest. Sharp, sudden, violent, Ethan jerked back, heart slamming against his ribs. The sound came again, closer this time. A heavy snap, like something stepping on a thick branch. He froze, instinct taken over. His breath turned shallow. Another sound followed, softer, but more disturbing. A dragging noise, slow, uneven, as though something heavy was being pulled across the forest floor. Ethan's fingers trembled around his camera. He didn't move. He barely blinked. His pulse thundered in his ears. The dragging grew louder. He took one step backward, then another. The forest seemed to inhale around him, tightening, watching, waiting. He whispered, "No, no, no, no," barely audible even to himself. The dragging stopped. Silence poured in, thick and unnatural. Ethan turned slowly, controlling every muscle in his neck, and looked toward the origin of the sound. Between the trees, maybe 20 feet away, stood a shape, not a person, at least not one behaving like a person. It was too still, too dark, too wrong. It didn't sway, didn't breathe, didn't shift. It simply stood there, as if carved out of shadow itself. Ethan blinked. The shape vanished. His body reacted before his mind did. He ran. Branches slapped against him as he tore through the forest, camera bouncing wildly against his chest. He didn't care about the footage anymore. He didn't care about the ribbon trail or the tent or the story. All he cared about was leaving. But Aokigahara didn't make it easy. Every direction looked the same. Every tree trunk blended into the next. Every shadow felt like it leaned toward him. Ethan's breaths grew ragged. His muscles burned. The forest swallowed the path behind him, swallowed the sounds of his footsteps, swallowed the very idea of escape. Then, almost violently, he broke through a thicket and stumbled onto the main trail. The change was instant. The air felt lighter, warmer, real again. Ethan doubled over, hands on his knees, trying to steady his breathing. A pair of hikers walked past, staring at him with wide eyes. "You okay, man?" one of them asked. He nodded, even though he absolutely wasn't. He stayed on the trail the entire way back. He didn't look left or right. He didn't film another second. When he stepped out of the forest and saw the parking lot again, something inside him finally loosened. He felt the world return, the normal world, the safe one. Ethan sat in the taxi with trembling hands. He didn't know what he saw deep in those trees. He didn't know what followed him or why the forest felt so alive, but he knew it wasn't imagination. Aokigahara was real. Its silence was real. Its weight, its darkness, its watchfulness, real. And as the taxi drove away, Ethan kept glancing back at the tree line, half expecting to see that dark shape standing between the trunks, still watching him leave, because Aokigahara doesn't forget its visitors. And sometimes they feel like it doesn't want to let them go.